My name is Michael Aller, and it's time for the next AllarMod update. In this update, I've added a suggestion from Chris, who wrote on the last YouTube video, that uh, there exists a cheat that allows you to disable the camera reset when you press the right stick in Dark Souls. And what I mean by this is, if you have your camera rotated any way except facing forward, and you press your right stick in, the camera will snap back to behind your character. And this can be frustrating if you're trying to lock onto an enemy and they're slightly out of range, and instead of locking on, it does a camera reset instead. So by turning this cheat on, you can move the camera anywhere you want, press the right stick, and it won't do that. However, it still works with target lock. So if we come down here and we get close enough to lock on a character, we can do that. But if we're facing a different direction and press the stick, it won't lock on. But if we get close enough to somebody, it'll snap back. And that's all pretty cool. And this isn't really something that I fully did myself. Chris linked to a cheat engine table on Nexus Mods by Svartberg. And all this cheat engine table does is it replaces a line of assembly that causes the game to check a value from somewhere in memory, and he redirects that check to be somewhere else. And I haven't really touched assembly before this, so this is all pretty kind of foreign to me. And so I had to learn a lot to kind of figure out how this works in order to translate it into C++. But I ended up getting something working. And I think my solution is kind of cool, although kind of super jank. And this it's really technical, but if you're interested in assembly, or if you know anything about this and can give me feedback on how I can do this better, please let me know, because this stuff is just really obtuse. Or yeah, I don't understand it at all, and this stuff is just really complicated, and I don't really understand much of it at all. But what I ended up with is a way for me to write some assembly and have that compiled into bytecode, and then using some C++ code that I wrote that took a lot of effort and a lot of figuring out and a lot of reference, figuring out how to create memory addresses that you can use from a 64-bit DLL injected into a 64-bit app, but still use 32-bit assembly instructions, so that you can keep your assembly footprint smaller, and how to handle things like accessing memory from C++ as well as assembly. So when I reroute this compare pointer to look at a different address in memory, I have access to that memory and I can control it through external means as well. And I ended up with this weird kind of setup where I write my assembly in these .asm files, and CMake runs NASM or NASM to compile that. And then in code here, I have a sort of class setup where I can say where I want to inject my code at, as well as what is the original assembly that should be there before I try to apply this, as well as a pointer to my assembly code and how long that assembly function is. There's really no good way I found to get the size of this function in a sane way, so you have to do that by hand. But what happens with this is you end up with something pretty convenient in that you can just make new variables, and if you just use certain hex tokens in your assembly, it'll swap those out, and what the code will do is it'll automatically clone your assembly function and put it somewhere in memory that's close to all the other Dark Souls code, so that you're within that 2 GB memory space, so you don't have to do 64-bit jumps. And it also allows you easy access to the same memory that you have referenced in your assembly functions to be from wherever you want, which is cool. So I can use this same byte pointer for all kinds of things. For example, applying this whole detour is real simple now. And because of that setup, I can have the UI layer simply just reference that byte, that same byte that's being referenced by that assembly code, which I know is dangerous in a sense, but what that allows me to do is I can set up UI to directly change the behavior of how that assembly code is working, or if I want to unapply that entire detour, I can do that. And what this looks like in memory is pretty simple. It's kind of just as what you'd expect from this. Right now, this is the original Dark Souls assembly, and if I turn on my detour, we can see that it gets patched out. We get a short jump, and we get some knops inserted to make up for the stolen bytes here. And if we follow this address, we end up with our assembly code that we wrote in here, and you can add whatever you want here, and this will all be caught by the injector and stuff, and it all kind of just works, which is really cool. And something you'll see here is that we don't have a jump back to where we detoured from. The code also automatically inserts a relative jump back to where we're going, or where we came from. And as you can see, that puts us right back to the end of our little detour here, which is really cool. And if we follow this and go to the address that the new comparison is looking at, we can see that if we go into Dark Souls here, I said if we go into Dark Souls, and I toggle this this bit here, which is that byte that's being referenced by that assembly code, in Cheat Engine you'll see that I am flipping the bit as well there. So that's pretty cool. And while this is all just for the disable camera reset cheat, the framework for this is going to allow me to do a lot more complicated assembly magic that I don't fully understand, but luckily some of those details are now hidden away from myself, so that should kind of improve the speed at which I can get some stuff in. And yeah, so while I don't intend for this cheat to be part of the sort of the training mode of AllarMod, it is an excellent step forward into the stuff that I want to be able to do with this. So I think that's pretty cool.